Hi all, let's look at one of the more interesting games from the Grand Chess Tour in Paris. This is a rapid game. Magnus Carlsen playing white against Maxime Vachier Lagrave. So this is in round 3. E4 for Magnus. We have a Sicilian defense, and we go into the Najdorf. And the most popular moves in this position actually include bishop e3, bishop g5, bishop e2, which was played, or bishop c4. These are the top 4. So bishop e2 is one of the top 4. e5, the knight goes back to f3 here. Another popular alternative is going to b3. That's actually more common. So knight f3, interesting. Bishop e7, bishop g5. White is sometimes willing to give up the dark square bishop for his light square strategy, trying to get a grip on the light squares, in particular d5. Knight b d7, a4, trying to restrict black from any b5 intention, which would enable the bishop to fianchetto. b6, still trying to fianchetto the bishop to put pressure on the center like this. Knight d2, with an idea perhaps of knight c4 to e3 to eye that d5 square. Maxime Vachier Lagrave plays h6, and white does take on f6 and plays knight c4. We have bishop b7, so this struggle over the central squares is apparent. And here, instead of a passive move, that would allow black potentially dangerous d5. If we play a move like bishop f3 or f3, I think we're asking for trouble here. Like d5 might be just totally equal for black. Bishop f3, again, it's not ideal. So this next move is very, very interesting. a5, gaining potentially a key tempo now after b5, knight b6, hitting the rook and eyeing d5 like this. So that's an interesting route compared to knight e3. This is with tempo. And it's also offering a pawn here that's actually taken for an exchange sack, a very creative exchange sack. So the game's gone a bit wild, but Magnus doesn't take on a8. In fact, maybe black should have, technically rook b8. This position is a small advantage for white with a nice grip on d5, and that's kind of white's whole idea. So this attempt to mix things up with the exchange sack is dynamic aggressive, but Magnus actually doesn't take on a8. He plays knight takes e4. If he did take on a8, queen takes, there's a nice battery, and this is just annoying actually. White has to play very carefully here. It may only emerge with a small advantage. For example, like this position, it's only a small advantage. There's certain counterplay for black, perhaps along this diagonal. So actually, this approach is just a pawn sack to try and further the grip on the light squares. Very interesting pawn sack. Bishop takes, queen takes, so white is officially a pawn down, but the threat is immediately check, and also taking the rook, of course. Rook a7. Now the check isn't played in this position. You might be wondering why. I'm not sure it achieves too much. Let's have a quick look. Just king f8, and this inconvenience maybe is only temporary. g6 and the king's coming to g7. It's equal-ish. There's good compensation for the pawn missing, but we have instead in this position c4 that not only marks the d5 square, it threatens to potentially create a passed pawn with c takes. We have d5, an energetic reply, going for bishop b4 check. White's king is still in the center. Nevertheless, an interesting decision here. If, on the other hand, by the way, b takes, the check here is quite good for white. That's a nice grip on d5. It's slightly different than before. So this d5 is an energetic reply for bishop b4 check. Magnus actually goes in with it. Check is king's inconvenience for a moment. Black actually tactically snaps off a5 to undermine b6. but he's swapping in fact the centre pawn for white's a pawn. So white here has an interesting position, knight against bishop, a pawn down, but it's actually kind of a very well placed knight. And does black have so much counterplay here? That bishop is kind of hemmed in by its own pawn. Queen d3, and white's even going to get the pawn back now. It's too dangerous to do anything like this because of rook a8 with the king in the center. So that pawn drops. So we're equal on pawns now. e4 at least opening up the bishop, and also queen g5 will pin a little bit the knight. g3, bishop e5, those things both happen. Now king f1 is played. f5, very aggressive. Queen e2, trying to hold back black from f4, dissuade it. Black played king h8. If he plays f4, queen takes e4, takes. This position is not good for black because of the check and check here. This is very bad after check here, and queen takes f7. White's totally winning. So that's an example of why king h8 perhaps is safer. On bishop d6, let's have a quick look at that. Knight b6, f4. This is also a very dangerous position for white tactically, but knight d7 might be the best. It's very complicated, basically. But okay, we have king h8, and now this is a bit of a mistake actually. So this is a critical position for a big mistake. So I mentioned just very quickly just there, bishop d6. That might be one of the better moves. But here we actually see f4. Sorry, after king h8, we see the move f4. It's cleverly winning a piece. Forking bishop and queen, and of course there's a pin there against the bishop. Now, it might be the case that black thought this was too dangerous because of queen h5, which threatens queen takes h2. Maybe black thought that's perpetual check time or something. But after knight f4, it's not clear at all. Queen takes h2, and white actually has a check here. Now where does the king go? If the king goes to g8, check here, and if rook f7, this is actually mating black. That's end of game, it's checkmate. So black's king is really in trouble there, funny enough. And on king h7, that's winning a rook with check, and coming back is fine for white. But that's similar to the game, very similar to the game here. After queen takes h2, we have a check, taking on f8, knight g6 check, and the knight actually comes back to h4, same sort of thing, protecting g2, check. And although black's winning the rook there, white is a knight up. After queen takes f5 check, Maxime Vachier Lagrave resigned. Here's an example continuation: king g8, check, and b5. That pawn is pretty strong here, and there's not much for black to do. If he plays this, and then what? The checks are just going to run out. White's a piece up. A fascinating positional pawn sacrifice by Magnus. He could have won the exchange, but his emphasis was on control of the position, I believe, and the knight squares and going for that stronger knight versus bishop. The queen e2 was a cunning move, threatening actually f4, which was totally missed, it seems, by black, or maybe underestimated, but it was actually getting to be a tricky position by that point. In any case, before the king h8 move, getting very tricky. Okay, I hope you got something out of this. Very interesting games from the Rapid tournament. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.